They shared a haunted costume, one of them never came home. The phone was still recording when they found it. It lay on a cold park bench, the screen bright and unlocked, a single audio file open and playing on repeat. When Detective Rivera hit play, the tiny speaker let out the scrape of wind, then a short burst of laughter, Kaylee's laugh, bright and nervous, and then something else, a soft, old-fashioned melody like a music box, very quiet under the wind. Kaylee's voice came next, close to the microphone. "This dress is wild," she said, breathless. "Mia's going to hate me for stealing it." The tape crackled. Then a whisper, not Kaylee's, slid into the recording like water into still glass. It said slow and sure, "My turn." Every head at the bench turned. The whisper did not sound like a girl. It sounded like someone else had practiced the shape of Kaylee's name until it fit. The file kept playing. The background noise swelled, small footfalls on gravel, the sound of fabric brushing, then Kaylee's voice again, a little further away, a little smaller. "Okay, Kay, come on, let's go." And a tiny sound, like someone taking a breath too close to the phone. Then the whisper, louder this time. "My turn." The microphone caught the whisper twice more, each time softer. The recording ended with static and a sound that made the room go very quiet. A woman singing a single slow line of a lullaby, the kind you only hear in old movies. Detective Rivera paused the player and looked up at us as if the room were suddenly colder. "We found the phone at Oak Hollow Park," he said. "No blood. No sign of a struggle. Just this." He hit play again, careful, as if the recording could break if handled too roughly. We all listened. The neighborhood kids called it a ghost story on the news. The police called it a missing person case. Kaylee's mother called it a nightmare. 2 days before, Kaylee had been laughing in Mia's living room, ankle socks and sweaters and all the careless things of 17-year-old girls. Mia handed her the dress like a joke, thin black lace, silver thread that caught the light like frost, a vintage masquerade piece with a tag stitched on inside. Circa 1958, The Widow's Waltz. They had found it at a tiny thrift shop on the edge of Boulder, the kind of place that smelled like dust and old stories. Kaylee had tried it on for the mirror, twirled, and said she felt like a movie star. Mia had watched her and smiled, then frowned. "It's haunted," she said, half serious, half jealous. "It looks like it will take your breath away." Kaylee had rolled her eyes. "This is the best find ever," she said. "We'll share it, like we share everything." They made a plan. Mia would wear it to the Halloween party at Lucas Reed's house on Saturday. Kaylee would wear it the weekend after, to the theater fundraiser downtown. They took pictures, giggling, sending the photos to friends. The dress looked perfect in yellow porch light, like something that should belong to a different time. That night, though, Mia came home pale. Her hands shook when she put the bag on the floor. "I couldn't keep it on," she told Kaylee, sitting on the edge of her bed. "It felt weird. Like someone breathing on my neck the whole time. Like the lace wanted to move on me." She laughed, but the laugh was too thin. "Don't be dramatic," Kaylee said, and hugged her friend like a promise. But Mia's eyes did not laugh. "I took it off in the bathroom," she said. "I swear I heard humming. Like a music box." Mia tapped her fingers on the sink. "It felt like someone was sitting right behind me." Kaylee teased her again and privately to herself, felt a frisson of excitement. The idea of a haunted dress was perfect for October. Maybe it was the thrill, she told herself, the idea of stepping into a story. The thrift shop, called Memory Lane, had been a tiny place wedged between a bakery and a pawnshop. The owner, a man named Mr. Hollis, kept postcards in a wooden box and dusted the mannequins carefully each morning. When the girls had asked about the tag, he had smiled like someone remembering something old. "Eleanor Vaughn," he said, soft. "She was a local actress, singer, beautiful, and a bit of a troublemaker. That dress came from her estate. She died in a show back in '58. He shrugged like people do when they say things they cannot fix. They called her the Widow's Waltz. Story says she kept the town watching. He folded his hands and bent his head like a man who had been taught to respect stories. "He died in a show," is a phrase that sits in small towns like a bruise. People remember the date as if it were a holiday. Eleanor Vaughn, according to Mr. Hollis and a few hurried internet searches, was a stage performer who had once been the talk of Boulder. She had an old photo behind the counter, a pale woman with very dark eyes and a dress that looked like the one Kaylee now owned. The caption was a single line: Eleanor Vaughn, October 31, 1958, final performance. The story that drifted out from the still photograph was that Eleanor had collapsed during a Halloween play, face hidden by her costume, and never moved again. Some said it was a heart attack. Some said the audience thought it was part of the act. After that night, the theater closed for a while. People whispered that Eleanor was angry she had to stop performing. Mia's hands tightened every time the name came up. She remembered a teacher mentioning that Eleanor's body was found still in the wings, lips pale like washed cloth. But teachers talk in quiet facts. The girls laughed about it, because teenagers used laughter like a shield. 2 days later, Kaylee wore the dress to the theater fundraiser anyway. The theater was old, soft lights and red velvet seats, a small stage that smelled of polish and history. Friends said she looked like she had stepped out of a different decade. Strangers stopped and asked where she had gotten the dress. Kaylee danced, and people cheered, and for a while it was everything she had hoped. Inside the dress, she said later on the recording, she felt warm, like a small pocket of sunshine. She told that to Mia on a text message. "It's weirdly warm, smiling face with smiling eyes." Then the text stopped. Mia told herself she had left early. She told herself Kaylee had gone with friends. When Kaylee did not answer calls the next morning, Mia called Kaylee's mother. Everything then began to sound like an ambulance for the small town. Neighbors hurried, the police checked sidewalks, friends walked the river trail. They called the theater and asked if anyone had seen Kaylee leave. The theater manager blinked and said no. The security footage from outside the theater showed Kaylee stepping out, laughing, then walking toward the park. The footage ended there. Detective Rivera sat us around his small table, eyes circling the web of information like a spider. He played the phone audio again. Kaylee's laughter, the music box under it, the whisper. "My turn." He told us they had combed through the park. They had asked park rangers to search the riverbank. They had interviewed anyone who'd been out late that night. Nobody had heard the lullaby. Nobody had seen Kaylee after the park bench. Mia's voice shook when she told the detective about the feeling in the dress. "It was like someone else was inside," she said. But Kaylee loved it. She wanted a story. She folded her hands and asked if they had found the dress. "We found nothing," Rivera said. "No sign of it. The thrift shop owner says he sold it to you too. He's sure." He tapped the desk. "There's a chance someone took it after Kaylee left. Maybe that's our lead." He looked at Mia and the list of cameras and the map of the park, and then he looked at the file on his desk like it was a living thing that had bitten him. At home that night, Mia opened her phone and scrolled through the photos. Kaylee spinning, Kaylee smiling, Kaylee's hand on the dress. A text popped up at the top from an unknown number. "Keep the lace." Mia dropped the phone like it was hot. She called Kaylee's number one more time. It went straight to voicemail. No other sound, only the echo of breath on glass. Mia sat with the phone in her palm and tried to remember every laugh, every small lie, every whisper. She tried to remember the way the dress had smelled like mothballs and roses and something old. Outside, the wind moved the trees and the few remaining Halloween lights on porches blinked like tired eyes. The town seemed to hold its breath, waiting for a door to open that would not open again. Detective Rivera said there were theories, runaways, kidnappings, misadventures. He wrote them down in neat, careful language. He asked for any more information. He asked Mia to be patient and keep looking. At 2 a.m, when the house was the kind of quiet where you can hear your own bones move, Mia pulled the blanket over her shoulders and thought of Kaylee walking down the path to the park. She imagined the way the fabric might have moved like water, the way it might have breathed. She wondered, with a knot in her stomach, if something had waited in that dress for its next chance. She set her phone on the bedside table and, because she could not stop herself, played the audio clip again. The whisper said, soft as sleep. My turn. The music box chimed, thin and patient. Then, at the very end of the recording, under the wind and the static, another voice spoke, lower, older, as if time itself had opened its mouth, and it said one word that made Mia drop the phone and cover her ears with a pillow, because even the word felt like a beginning. Stay. The word stay hung in Mia's room like a spiderweb. She sat very still and listened until the house made its usual small sounds again, the fridge sighing, a car passing down the street, the soft tick of the clock. Dawn came thin and pale. Mia called Detective Rivera and told him about the voice. He did not sound surprised. He sounded tired in a different way now, like someone who had been inventing reason for nights and found none. They pulled everything they could from Kaylee's phone. The recordings, the texts, the last map location. The phone showed the same trail the theater footage had shown, out of the theater, down Main Street, toward Oak Hollow Park. But there were gaps, 15 minutes of nothing in the timeline where the phone's location held steady and offered no signal. It was as if Kaylee had walked into a pocket of silence. The investigators called it many things, a signal drop, a technical failure, an unexplainable glitch. To Mia, it felt like something had closed around Kaylee and kept her inside. The community did what small towns do when something terrible happens, they stepped closer. People posted flyers, families organized search parties, and the theater put out a request for old props and stagehands to remember anything about Eleanor Vaughn. In the thrift shop, Mr. Hollis unlocked the back storeroom and pulled down a box labeled VHS, old, cracking, yellow-stained. In it were old news clips from the time when Eleanor had been famous. There was a clip of Eleanor on stage, dressed in the very same lace, silver thread catching the theater lights like frost. She was young and vigorous, and then, in a blink, she doubled over and fell. The clip cut to chaos. An old woman named Ruth came forward after seeing the news clip. She had been at that last performance in 1958, sitting in the balcony with popcorn in her lap. Ruth was very old now, soft-voiced and small, but the memory hadn't aged. She described the night in careful fragments. Eleanor had been radiant, she said. The play was a comedy, the audience laughing. Then Eleanor had begun to sing a short lullaby between scenes, a small tradition, Ruth remembered, then she had stopped in the middle of a phrase. Her face had paled, and she had collapsed. At first, Ruth said, we thought it was part of the act. Her costume was so dramatic. Then the orchestra kept playing and the actors kept bowing. We all thought maybe it was clever. But she did not move. Ruth held Mia's hand and looked at her like she held the last page of a book. Afterwards, nobody could agree why she died, she said. Some said heart. Some said the dress was too tight. One doctor said she was frightened of something. That always sounded strange to me, frightened. But fear can do terrible things. Ruth wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and said, and sometimes a thing that loved applause doesn't like being quieted. Detective Rivera dug through city archives and found an obituary and a clipping about the lawsuit that followed. Eleanor's husband had sued the theater for negligence. The theater shut down for a while and then reopened under new management. The dress had disappeared from evidence after the case. People swapped stories. Some said the family took it. Some said fans stole it as a relic. The thrift shop owner insisted the dress came from an estate sale, from a trunk sold by a woman claiming to be Eleanor's niece. He signed a paper saying so. The paper was not much of a map. Mia and Rivera spent long afternoons walking the river trail in Oak Hollow Park, asking people if they'd seen Kaylee, showing photos, trying to pull memory into focus. They looked at security footage again and again. They chased leads, an antique dealer who sold Victorian items, a stranger buying old stage props, a pair of teenagers who liked to collect costumes. Nothing fit. The blue coin, the one found on the porch in the other story Mia had read online, had no match. There were coincidences, but coincidences do not explain someone vanishing. On a raw, windy evening, Mia decided she had to go back to memory lane. The store smelled like old paper and cinnamon. Mr. Hollis was behind the counter, polishing a brass doorknob. When Mia asked him if he remembered anything about the woman who sold the dress, his face closed like a book. "I remember her hands," he said slowly. "They were small and she had a rash, like from dye. She said she was cleaning out family things. She looked tired. She left in a rush, with the trunk. I did not think much then." He sighed. "But later, after Kaylee disappeared, I kept thinking, maybe I should have asked for an address." Mia left with nothing but a name, Lorna Finch. A janitor at the old theater remembered a woman by that name who used to come around and tidy up. Lorna was a niece, someone said. Lorna moved away. Lorna might be the bridge between the dress and the present. They found Lorna in a small apartment on the edge of town. She was small and quick and at first angry at being disturbed. But when she saw Kaylee's photo, Lorna's hands folded like a woman remembering a prayer. She told them a story that made the air feel like it had been pulled through a keyhole. "Yes," Lorna said. "Eleanor was family. And Anne maybe." Her voice was small but steady. "Eleanor loved the stage. She loved to feel the lights. After she died, I kept a few things. I thought they were just cloth and buttons. We sold the rest to keep the house. I didn't mean to cause." Her hands trembled and a tear cracked down her cheek. "I thought if I let the dress go, she could rest. I didn't think she would come after us." Mia's throat tightened. "Come after us how?" she asked. Lorna looked at the floor. "When the dress left the house, my sister's child started waking at night and talking to an empty chair. My cousin started to hum an old melody without knowing why. Things got strange. I thought it was grief. I thought people were remembering. Then my sister found a note on her porch one morning that said, 'Keep the lace.' She burned it. We all laughed. But the laughter changed after that. It felt like the house had a voice." Mia asked Lorna if she had sold the dress directly to Mr. Hollis. Lorna said she had. She had been in a hurry and did not keep records. "I think I threw away the tag," she whispered. "I thought it was just old." Lorna said she had seen Kaylee on TV and cried. She had a small, guilty look like someone who had set down something and not watched it properly. Detective Rivera took the notes and nodded as if the world had made a little more sense. But sense is a thin thing. He told Mia they would check Lorna's story against sales records and the estate papers. He put out an APB on anyone who might have sold the dress after Lorna. He called in the theater's old stage manager, who said he remembered Eleanor fondly, and said a costume like that had been a cherished thing. He gave them a list of people who had worked in the theater in the late 1950s, a map of possible owners, witnesses, and relatives. For a while, it seemed like the case would be a long list of quiet people and old paper. Then a student at the university called the sheriff with a lead. He said he had been researching local folklore and had found an old news article about a small group that performed midnight plays in 1959, plays with music boxes and masked dancers. One name kept appearing in the photos, a woman who looked like Eleanor. In one picture she held a small round token. The token looked much like the blue ones Mia had seen in the crawlspace of the house from the other town's story. The student sent a scan. Something in that token made the skin on Mia's arms crawl. The token in the photo had the same tiny scratches, the same faint letters that could spell anything. Detective Rivera widened his eyes and put his palm on the phone screen for a long second. "That's our pattern," he said. "Small offerings. Tokens. People leaving them as if to say sorry or thanks." He did not say to whom. He did not say why. Mia began to dream of lace. She dreamed of Kaylee's laugh like a bell put inside a box. She dreamed of old stage lights blinking like sleeping eyes. She walked the park at night with a flashlight and a coat, thinking she might find the dress or find Kaylee or find some small proof that would make everything sensible again. Once, when the moon was low, she thought she saw a pale shimmer in the bushes, like a piece of cloth caught on a branch. She ran toward it and stumbled and found only an old ribbon. The town had a way of offering up things that looked like answers and then taking them back. Months went by. The press cooled. The missing person posters faded into mailboxes. People stopped visiting the park as often. The police never stopped. They added the case to a file and checked leads when they came. Mia learned to live with not knowing. She finished the school year and started classes with a weight she could not name. She stopped sleeping as much. She put her phone on silent and in another room, and sometimes she would wake with it beside her, vibrating with a message from an unknown number saying, simply, "Keep the lace." One chilly evening, almost a year after Kaylee vanished, Mia received a package with no return address. Inside, on a bed of tissue paper, lay a single piece of black lace, the very lace that had edged the widow's Waltz dress. It smelled faintly of old perfume and mothballs. The note inside said, in a childlike hand, "We keep it warm. We are sorry. She sings less when we do." Mia's hands went numb. She held the lace and felt a long memory move through it, as if the fabric had kept a small echo of every hand that had once touched it. On the back of the note, in a darker ink, someone had added a single word. "Stay." She understood then that this was not a question but an invitation. The dress was not a simple piece of cloth. It was a thing that had grown meaning from people's attention. It asked for being noticed and fed. It took, the notes implied, and then it asked for more. Mia folded the lace and put it in a box. She wanted to burn it. She wanted to use it as evidence. She wanted to throw it in the river. In the end, she locked it in a drawer and told no one. She thought, if the dress wanted an audience, she would not give it one. She would not answer the invitation. Weeks later, she walked past Oak Hollow Park on her way home and saw a small group of teenagers laughing, a handful of costumes drifting through the night. A little girl turned and waved at Mia like a small flame. She looked safe and not knowing how close the edge is. Mia hugged herself against the cold and kept walking. At home, the phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "She listens." Mia did not answer. She closed her eyes and tried to breathe like a person who has learned to be careful with silence. On the couch, the drawer with the lace hummed softly, though she could not say why. The house was the same as it had always been, except that sometimes, when the wind moved the trees a certain way and the moon shone thin, Mia thought she heard the faintest bell of a music box, patient and far away, playing one small line of a lullaby, like a voice reminding the world that it is still there. She kept the lace. She kept Kaylee's photo in her wallet. She kept living. But inside she carried a new rule, a small promise, never to put on a costume that belonged to someone else. Never to borrow a story that was still being told. And yet, on certain nights when the town smelled of fires and caramel apples and someone called the house names like a joke to keep the quiet out, the voice came back in her phone, soft as a breath. "Stay." In the end, Kaylee was never found, and the dress was never seen again. The thrift store closed, and the town quietly stopped talking about it. But every Halloween night, people still hear faint music near Oak Hollow Park, a slow waltz and a woman's voice whispering, "My turn." Mia never wore another costume. Yet sometimes, she swears she can still feel the brush of lace on her arm, like the dress is still waiting to dance again.